You're listening to Two Girls, One Crossword.
Do you do the New Yorker on the app or online?
Online.
Okay. Well, I don't know if they have this. On the app, the little icons they have next to the crosswords are actually like pretty cute. They're like pink and red. There's one that's like a lock and a key, but the lock has a crossword design on it.
I think they do. Yes. They're cute.
Anyways, it's just a vibe.
It's a vibe. It's a good vibe. I also
Tattoo
like
idea?
that. Yeah, right?
That's like everything
we're like, tattoo. I also like that the New Yorker has like cute little sketches of everybody.
Yeah, I know. You really made it when you get like a cartoon version of
Yourself.
If you don't know, if you're like on the puzzles, and do they do it for articles too? I don't know.
They might. I'm not sure. Definitely like when you like click into the puzzles and you see who's constructing. If it's like Eric Agard, Patrick Berry, Anna Schechtman, they
make a little cartoon picture of them. It's so cute.
And it's all in the same style. And you truly know you have made it in the Crossworld if you get your New Yorker sketch.
Yeah.
I mean, we're obviously like Crossworld adjacent, but that's our gauge of officially you have made it if you get a crossword sketch in the New Yorker. So,
luckily, we're not like successful because I would be so obnoxious about that. I'd be like, yeah, I have a New Yorker cartoon of myself and I've made it my icon on all my social media. So.
Yeah, it made it my personality, my entire personality trait. Basically, it's like upgrading from the New Yorker like tote bag, subscription tote bag to the New Yorker crossword sketch. You made it big.
Get a tote bag with your cartoon of yourself.
That would be really cute merch to give to all the constructors out there, New Yorker.
Hello, hire us. We're idea people.
Or, okay, actually, here's a big idea. Whoever does their sketches, right, they should make a TikTok filter.
Yeah. But I feel like that's hard.
Well, it's not but I mean, you got 12-year-olds making freaking TikTok filters every other day. I'm sure the New Yorker illustrator can do it too. Not the
12-year-olds listening are very insulted by that.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is like if a 12-year-old can do it, so can a New Yorker illustrator.
That's not a helping your
is
cause.
it not?
But anyways, to all the 12-year-olds listening and anyone else listening,
to the illustrator listening,
yes, this is Two Girls, One Crossword. I'm Grace Topinka.
I'm Chelsea Rowan. We're back again. Thanks for coming back for another week in paradise.
Sorry, I had to take a break, y'all. I'm moving. If anyone's watching on our YouTube, you'll see that my background is much more bare than it normally is. So,
she's hitting the road. She's leaving town, fleeing town.
Yeah, and no one's knowing where I'm going.
She's getting the hell out of Dodge. Yeah, so, how things go, in the middle of your move, you have a little bit of a breakdown, you cry, like one tear.
Yeah. You're up all night, you wake up at like 5 a.m.,
All the things. And so sometimes that stuff gets in the way of a crossword podcast you may or may not be co-hosting.
Exactly. And it got in the way of me posting my poll for this week, so I posted it very late. So I'm sorry if our Pollpalooza section...
We don't have to do a Pollpalooza. We can do it next week. We can include it next week.
I know, but I feel like it's of the moment. Next week, we're going to have a Pollpalooza based on this week's trivia.
True. All right.
Well, I'll just say I'll update it next week if, things really change. Mm-hmm. But we asked our Twitter followers lightning round poll, because I literally posted it like an hour ago. What's your favorite Candy Hearts theme? Because if you remember from Chelsea's topic last week, Candy Hearts come out with a new theme like every year that they base some of their new phrases on. So, Forbidden Fruit, aka the Twilight themed one. A Menu of Love.
Ooh.
Love songs, or Love's in the Forecast.
I actually had a hard time picking.
Well, Twilight won. There weren't that many votes, but so far Twilight's in the lead.
In the lead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then Love songs and Love's in the Forecast are tied behind it, and then no one's voted for A Menu of Love yet. So the poll is still, well, actually it won't be open when you listen to this, so
good luck.
Sorry.
If you're listening to this now, you can go on our Twitter and see the official results. Okay? Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I had a hard time picking because obviously I would choose Twilight. Like, that's like a given. But The themes you picked are so good. I think between Forecast of Love or Menu of Love or whatever those two are,
Mm-hmm.
the menu one, I'm all for food stuff. So, like,
Yeah.
I thought it was so cute, that one. But when you put Twilight in the mix, like, it's actually not a fair fight. So,
Exactly. Yeah. I obviously voted for Twilight. It was an easy one for me. But I can't wait until like next February to figure out to learn what the new theme is.
I know. I hope we'll remember, okay? So the first year that I forget Spangler Candy Company had the candy hearts, they ran them with like vintage phrases, but the printing process of the phrases was totally botched, so a lot of them didn't even come out, which is strange to me why they would even, sell them, right?
It's too late at that point.
I guess so. And then 2021 was all like, stick to it. Don't give up.
Motivational.
Yeah. Or whatever. Was that this year? I think it was this year. 2022 is motivational.
Yeah, so we'll see.
We'll see what next year is. I hope they go back to some of the classic themes, like Menu of Love is a good one. I mean, don't repeat that, but like along those lines.
Yes, or we will riot.
Yes. I have not a corrections corner, but I just wanted to clarify something.
Okay.
Last time we spoke, we plugged Haley Gold's Letters to Margaret, which is a graphic novel that you can buy, which is now out. If you've listened for a while, we had Haley on the podcast a while ago. We talked about the book. The book is for sale on loansharkgames.com, and it's not loan sharks as in LOAN. It's loan as singular, LONE, sharkgames.com. So loansharkgames.com, a singular shark games.com. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear for anybody out there who got money on the brain instead of 1, 2, 3 shark, red shark, blue shark,
That's the problem with the punny, like if you ever have a punny company name or a website like that.
Yeah.
Then you always have to like be explaining, spelling things out for people.
Exactly. And it's probably not to like pull my social media card here, but it's probably not good for your SEO. I'm just going to say it right now.
She said it.
Google is probably not happy with you, or, the people who are Googling you are not happy. Anyway, whatever. They didn't ask. So, okay. Crossword news as we slowly tumble our way into hits and shits. This past week, if you're in the crossworld, I'm sure everybody in the crossworld who's listening saw this, but Paolo Pasco posted his time for a Monday New York Times solve he solved a Monday New York Times in 53 seconds.
He claims.
Anyway, let's just say that I was shocked.
It takes me 53 seconds to like open the app and
to read the
start
first
to concentrate.
clue.
Yeah.
I'm like reading the first clue. I'm like, wait a second, hold on. I got to put my glasses on. It's a whole thing. No, honey, I was shocked. That was big news out in the crossworld. It shook things up, I think, on Twitter a little bit.
I would love to watch him solve in real time.
Please. You got 2 viewers right here.
I have some crossword adjacent news.
Okay.
For anyone who listened to our license plate episode. So my girlfriend is from outside of Boston area, and she was home last week, and she went to a grocery store with her dad, and while they were leaving, her dad was like, that's weird. I just saw a license plate with the number 1 on it.
Are you serious?
He saw the 1. If you remember, Massachusetts was the first state to ever issue license plates, and they started at number 1, and they went on from there, and the number 1 has just been in the same family. They keep like transferring that plate number. So yeah, I think it's Medway, she said, a suburb outside of Boston, if anyone knows, but
that is shocking.
In the flesh.
In the flesh.
I didn't even care. I was like, some of us would kill to see that license plate in the wild.
Literally. Okay, and to make this conspiracy even deeper, do not forget that the family that has the monopoly on the 1 license plate is none other than the Tudor family, who we have to thank for national ice delivery. So yeah, that's it. And that's all.
Wild. Everything's connected.
It all comes together. If the Tudors are out there listening, hit us up. We want to see your license plate. Thank you.
And if I ever catch you in Massachusetts, I will take a picture of your license plate.
Just know you're done. You're done. Wow. Good news. Shall we keep on keeping on into our hits and our shits? Our heights and shites. Okay. I'll start with so we missed a week last week. So some of my hits and shits are from the last 2 weeks. Deal with it. I'll start with the Saturday, April 16th New York Times by Hemant Mehta. I really liked 17 across. Line of Pokemon. Gotta catch 'em all. Like a
Nice.
line of Pokemon. 28 across. Daisy Dukes, for example. Booty shorts.
Cute.
Let's see. 8 down. Target alternative. Kohl's. Have you started collecting your Kohl's cash?
No.
Oh.
I feel like I could get into Kohl's Cash, but Kohl's only has clothes, right? Or am I wrong?
I feel like that's true. And it's interesting because I feel like it's Target and Walmart that are more closely related than a Target and a Kohl's. Maybe back in the day, Target and Kohl's were closer. But now Target's got the supermarket. They got the,
homeware.
They got
decor.
the pharmacy, like all that stuff. And I feel like Kohl's is like clothes and then like as seen on TV products. But maybe that's a really, bad understanding of what actually goes on inside of Kohl's. Has been years.
There's no way to know.
There's no way to know. Speaking of Kohl's, 15 down. Propensity for pilfering. And the answer is sticky fingers.
I like that.
Me too. Doesn't really have much to do with Kohl's, but I still liked it.
You're saying that you've shoplifted from Kohl's?
Plead the fifth. No, I've never. Not from Kohl's.
Okay.
Dun dun dun. Let the drama
I didn't realize
begin.
I was talking to such a badass criminal over here.
Just so you know, I've done illegal things in the past. Like, I don't know. Maybe turned on a no turn on red sign. By accident.
I've never shoplifted. I never done anything like that. My anxiety would never let me. I wouldn't be able to sleep for like weeks. One time in kindergarten, I like took a toy home or something from class, and it literally like kept me up. I don't know what I ended up doing with it. I still remember it, like how nervous I was if someone was going to find out that I did that.
They knew. Just so you know, they knew.
Yeah. Whoops.
Anyway, that's all I got from that puzzle. What do you got?
The April 25th New Yorker puzzle by Brooke Husick. I learned something. 50 across. Spots for circular barbell piercings, which we both happen to have. Thank you very much. And it was only 5 letters. I was like, it's not septums. It was septa.
Septa, exactly. Multiple septa, I guess, since it was plural. But I also learned that too, because I was also thinking like septum, but it's not, it doesn't fit.
Yeah, so Chelsea and I have our septas pierced.
We do.
In case anyone wants to know. 56 across, improv partner segue. Yes, and.
Mm-hmm.
And then 33 down, markers that might be used to customize vans. Sharpies.
Yes.
I use Sharpies to customize my Converse.
Yes. And I use glitter pens to customize my Converse. I never had Vans. I mean, I had Vans eventually, but like in the time when I was like, quote, customizing or like drawing on my shoes, it was Converse time. Like that's when I was wearing Converse.
Although I feel like there are people who like professionally customize Vans for you with Sharpies.
They do. Yeah. It's
Mine
actually
was
really
not
impressive.
That.
No.
It was like writing the name of my favorite band.
Yeah. Like my friends wrote their names on the soles. I colored in my white laces, you know.
Do a star on the toe.
I did a checker board on the white toe.
I feel like I did that on one of mine too.
Yeah. Anyway, we're cool. We're cool.
Yeah, we would have been friends probably in middle school.
We might have been friends. Speaking of Sharpies and Vans, I liked the 5 down from that puzzle. Guy with an anime-inspired aesthetic on TikTok. And the answer is e-boy, which is true now that I think about it. I never really thought of e-boys as like anime-inspired. I always thought of them more as like emo adjacent, you know? But yeah, anime is also adjacent to emo in some way.
It's all connected. It's just
All
like the ice
connected.
thing.
Yeah. And so I think e-boys would use Sharpies to draw on their vans.
I agree.
But the thing about like e-boys is there's like a thirst trap element to them, right? But like thirst trap is too strong a word for it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I could see there is, but it's no, it is a thirst trap. It's just pretending not to be.
Right. They're what's the word?
Covert thirst trap.
Yeah, but they're like the boys that will do anything for girls to get girls' attention. Not pick-me's, but
is there a boy version of pick me or no? Because everyone just hates women.
I think you can be a pick-me boy.
Yeah.
But what's the word? And people can use it derogatively about men who like try to appease to women. Oh,
a femcel?
No. Come back to me. I will let you know when the word comes to me. It might come to me in the middle of Grace's topic, in which case I will have an aha moment, but stay tuned. What else? Oh, sorry. From that Brooke Cusick puzzle, I just wanted to pick your brain about this one. 28 across. Compliment to a nonconformist. And the answer was never change. And I just want to say that when I was younger, I was weird. I was a weirdo. Mm-hmm. I didn't fit in. And I don't mean that in like I was a nonconformist. Like, I definitely had some sort of neurodivergency going on and people were like treated me very differently. Mm-hmm. And I like had weird style, like whatever. This is before I like came into myself. And I used to be told all the time, never change. And it always felt so demeaning to me because I always felt like I don't want to be weird. I want people to like me. And you're telling me to never change as if like, it's okay that you're fucking weird.
Yeah. Just be yourself. Be your weird self.
And I'm like, but nobody likes that. Not to like trauma dump on anybody, but like I always took that as like not a compliment. So just to say, well, now that I am a nonconformist, that would stroke my ego a little bit.
I don't like people telling me what to do, so I would never find a compliment of someone telling me to never change. I'd be like, just because you said that, I'm changing everything about myself.
We're done. I'm done. This is a new personality coming your way. You got anything else?
I liked The Tuesday New Yorker by Patrick Barry.
Mm-hmm.
32 down. It may be open for dinner in the middle of nowhere. This one took me a bit, but it's mess kit, which is like when you're camping, your plate and knives and stuff, forks. And then 34 down, junk drawer ? But it's junk drawer, and the answer was doodler. Although I feel like I've seen that before, and it probably made it on my hit list before too.
I did half of that puzzle, and that answer I did not get. So thank you for that. I like that.
Now you know.
Now I know. I liked the Monday, April 18th, New Yorker by Anna Schechtman, 27 across. Evidence of a deleted tweet, perhaps. The answer was screenshot, which I like. Receipts. I also just really like this clue for an answer which is crosswordese. We see it literally all the time. You will see Brian Eno clued in the crossword maybe like 4 or 5 times in a week on like a busy week for Brian. Anyway, this clue is 35 across. Composer Brian, who said about NFTs, quote, "How sweet. Now artists can become little capitalist assholes as well," end quote, which is amazing. And the answer, of course, is Eno, E-N-O, which is crosswordese. We see it in crosswords all the time. But I love when you get a nice like little factoid in your crossword. And this made me think of you, 8 down. Social activity that's usually tough to get out of, question mark.
Escape room.
Escape room, of course. And then 28 down. I liked this answer. Live, surprisingly. The answer was cheated death. Ooh. Very nice. What else you got?
I learned something from the Wednesday, April 27th New York Times by Alex Bosch. B-A-J-C-Z. I don't know how to pronounce that J-C-Z, but I'd like to know.
Please let us know.
Okay. 38 down. One-time presidential daughter with the code name Radiance.
Oh, this was Malia.
Malia. But I didn't know that. I didn't know any of their code names. So I looked it up. Barack Obama was Renegade, so then everyone in the family has to start with an R. So then Michelle was Renaissance. Malia was Radiance, and Sasha was Rosebud. And the names are supposed to like reflect their personalities.
Wow.
I wonder what our code names would be.
We have to pick the same letter.
Mm-hmm.
Should it be a C? Not because it's my first name, but because of crossword. Maybe.
Okay. I would be like Calico.
And mine would be cheese.
Yeah, there you go.
I already go by cheese, so unwillingly, I have adapted into it though.
She's embraced it. Well, this from that puzzle 14 across, where one may purchase a sectional with a side of meatballs.
It's good.
IKEA. That's the topic you did. And then 42 across, hairstyle that sounds edible. Bun.
Cute. That was a cute one.
Yeah.
I have to. I would be remiss if I did not bring this clue up. My favorite of the week. Friday, April 22nd, New Yorker by Janie Smolyan. 44 down. Bucket list restaurant, ? KFC. Sorry.
Wow.
It made me laugh.
That's good.
It made me laugh. And I want to end on the New York Times from Sunday, April 24th by Sam Erskine. I want to talk about the theme because in general, the clues and the answers, I really liked them. I had a fun time figuring out what they were and solving it. It was a really good experience, like an actual solving experience. I don't understand the theme. I feel like there's something else going on, like a second level.
Mm-hmm.
I have not figured it out yet, okay? And I'll tell you why. The puzzle is called Magazine Racket. And essentially, the clues are all, like, the answers are all common phrases that you then add the letter E-T to the end of to make, like, punny answers. Examples. This is not all of them. I'll just give you some answers. So, examples. 23 across. A bit of company swag for a genius bar, ? The answer is Apple Jacket. Applejack being the common phrase, and ET at the end, Apple Jacket. Okay. 48 across. Today's plans, watching someone's kids, ? And the answer is sitting on the docket, as in sitting, like babysitting is on the docket, today's plans.
I see. Okay.
The pun, the joke is sitting on the dock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then 65 across. How much Michael Jordan or Wilt Chamberlain could score hyperbolically, ? Like a million buckets or like $1 million, so on and so forth. This is my favorite one. 115 across. Cry following an electrical malfunction, ? And the answer is darn sockets instead of darn socks, which I think is really cute. I just don't understand why the puzzle is called Magazine Racket.
Magazine rack?
But yeah, but I don't understand why it's called that. Like, it doesn't, other than also following the rules of the theme, it makes me think that there's an overarching theme. Like, this is all...
That has to do with magazines?
That all has to do with magazines. So if I'm missing something, listeners, please, let me know. But I also really liked 92 across from that puzzle. Guacamole go with, ?
Holy
guacamole. I love it. And then maybe like a little bit of a shit. Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe just like cheeky shit here and there. Okay. 33 across. Irish blank. Popular St. Patrick's Day cocktail. And the answer is car bomb.
Oh, yeah, but I feel like
people aren't doing
the Irish
that
don't
anymore.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I texted my one Irish friend and was like, hey, like, not to be weird, but like, how do you feel about this? Like, what do people, and he's like, in general, people do not like that. And I was like, haha, it does not pass the breakfast test. So I guess I feel like it just makes light of like a very intense political situation. And it's like mostly Americans doing it who have like very little understanding of like the history of the Troubles, or in general, like, anyway, so just a minor little like shit there for you.
Just a little note.
Little note for you from your local girl who has one Irish friend.
So. That's us. She has one Irish friend and she shares them with me.
It's true.
So if you ever hear, actually, no, we know 2 Irish people. Billy's husband. So we have 2 Irish friends.
That's all that I have.
That's all that I have. Shall we flip the coin?
Flipping the coin. Okay.
Did I go first last time or no?
No.
Okay, it's rigged again.
It's rigged. So I'm flipping the coin now.
She claims there's no way for me to actually know if she's flipping the coin.
Tails!
Wow. Have you ever heard the phrase, this is American as blank? Sometimes like, this is American as apple pie,
Yes.
as baseball, serial killers, which I did a research project on in college. But what if about this is as American as professional wrestling? My topic comes from, did you do this one too?
No.
Okay. The face you made, I was like, oh my gosh. My topic comes from the New Yorker April 26th puzzle by Patrick Berry, 24 across, WWE superstar Banks. Answer, Sasha.
Wow. Did you know that they're located in Connecticut? Like really close to where I went to school?
I didn't.
Tons of people in my, in like the communication department, like the film department at my school would get like internships there because it's like one of the big quote production companies in the state. Isn't
at
that weird?
WWE specifically? Yeah. Okay. They started
which one is it?
Or
It's-
WWE
Yeah.
now, yeah. There's also CWC.
WWE.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about professional wrestling before we get into WWE specifically, because that's just like one brand of professional wrestling promotion. If someone is like a diehard professional wrestling fan, this episode is probably not for you, because I'm really just glossing over here. And I know that there's fandoms that are really intense about this. Sure. Do you ever get into professional wrestling? Like in the 90s, I feel like I watched some WrestleMania with my cousins and I briefly was into it.
I was never like personally into it. I couldn't remember any of the wrestler names, but the woman who used to babysit me and my brothers, her kids were like buying the pay-per-views, like doing the whole thing, always doing like faking the moves and stuff like that. Like, they had like the dolls that you could like pretend to play, whatever. So I was, WWE, WrestleMania adjacent, but not really in it to win it, if you know what I mean.
I remember my cousin had like the pillow that was like Hulk Hogan. Do you remember? Like shaped as a person. Those were amazing. I would get one of those again and like have it as a vintage.
Yes,
decor.
Well, the belts, all the stuff. Yeah.
Yes. It was a moment.
Ooh,
okay.
I just remember Triple X. He would go like,
God. Oh.
You have to watch on YouTube. Anyway, continue, please. I'm sorry.
All right, so let's just talk about professional wrestling in general. So it started in the U.S. It's very much like an American thing, not surprisingly. It started in the late 1800s after the Civil War. It was basically just like a low-cost entertainment type thing that people could see. It was like in traveling carnivals and different acts like that. And most of the performers were college wrestlers who like wanted to make quick money. Because there's wrestling, like when you think of college wrestling where you're in the ring,
right?
And then professional wrestling. Now they're 2 very different things. At the time, it was kind of like a lot of crossover.
Okay.
But the shows were often called athletic shows, and sometimes the wrestlers would even challenge members of the audience. So it became like a way to gamble. That was one of the main things, is like a carnival would show up in a town, and they'd start like talking like, oh, we have the strongest wrestler in the world. Like, I don't think anyone in this town could take him. And so if you thought you were like the strongest guy in town, you could go, everyone would pay like a nickel to watch. You would pay a nickel to fight. And if you won, you would get like 50 cents, which was a lot back in the day.
Yeah.
But that's basically like how they did it. But sometimes the wrestler would get so aggressive, and then the audience would be upset about it. Like, no, you're hurting him. And then someone from the audience would stand up and be like, hey, let me get in there. I'll take you. And then they'd be like, no, you have to come back tonight because the wrestler needs to rest. And so then everyone would come back again at night, and they would all pay money and watch, these 2 guys wrestle again. But the kick is the guy who stood up in the audience is part of the carnival.
Of course.
So that's like kind of the beginnings of like this fake reality type thing. So these carnival wrestlers had managers who would help come up with storylines and fake personas to make the matches more interesting. And the wrestlers also used illegal hooks to make sure they could take on any opponent. So a hook is not allowed in like competitive wrestling. It's when you position your hands and feet in a way to like control and manipulate the other person. It's a way to do like, I don't know, I feel like you see it a lot in wrestling where you put your leg behind someone else's leg and then make them like basically trip over your leg. It's a takedown, etc. But basically they had all these little tricks to make sure that they could always win. Like there were some famous wrestlers who were like 130 pounds who'd take on like anyone and win because they basically did all these illegal moves.
Okay.
But basically they quickly realized you could make a lot of money in wrestling, and it became more of like a business oriented entertainment event as opposed to like an athletic competition. In the early 1900s, wrestling was very popular in the Midwest, where ethnic communities like German, Polish, Czech, Hungarian, Greek, and Scandinavian men would like continue to carry on fighting styles from their home countries. And at that time, wrestling's popularity was second only to baseball. That's how popular it was. They had like trading cards, competitive wrestling programs in colleges, high schools, athletic clubs. But between 1915 and 1920, wrestling took a downspin, mainly because people think, it hasn't been totally proven, but that other sports like boxing started spreading rumors that like wrestling was fake and it wasn't legitimate. And so people like started not to trust it. They thought everything was fixed. So media attention started focusing on like the illegitimacy of wrestling instead of the athleticism in it. But then in came three professional wrestlers named Ed Lewis, Billy Sando, and Toots Mont. His name is Toots.
Love it.
And they formed their own promotion, which is kind of like a managerial team that like picks up wrestlers and then puts on shows.
It's kind of how boxing is, sort of, to this day. That's a very, very, very basic understanding of boxing.
We have the world's biggest boxing fan over here.
Yeah.
And these three were called the Gold Dust Trio because they made wrestling financially lucrative again.
Okay.
And they started introducing all these new things that we still see today, like time limits, flashy new holds, signature moves, tag team wrestlings, and things like distracting the ref, which I feel like I would enjoy that part of it, like the absurdity of it all.
Well, we should go to a wrestling match.
I know, we should. It would be fun. The trio's greatest innovation within professional wrestling was the use of a regular group of wrestlers for a package show. So basically, promoters used to pay traveling wrestlers to perform on certain dates, and they would just like randomly combine whichever wrestlers were available. But the trio decided to keep the same wrestlers for months or years at a time, allowing for like year-long feuds and different, storylines to develop. And then in the 1950s, wrestling started showing up on television, and that changed things a lot too. It became way more like entertainment focused. Gorgeous George became one of the most popular gimmick characters at the time. He was flamboyant and charismatic, and he was like, that was kind of the turning point where wrestling shifted from being just about athleticism to being about performance. So at that time, a lot of promoters wouldn't even hire like real wrestlers. They just wanted to hire performers, basically.
Okay.
But Gorgeous George was also the first of his kind in villains, because before him, the like villain wrestlers would be like negative portrayals of ethnic group or like Nazis, like more serious villains. But then Gorgeous George was like, he was just like a narcissist and this like crazy, charismatic character.
Interesting.
So that was kind of the beginning of like maybe the characters taking themselves less seriously. And he was also the first to use entrance music.
Oh.
So, thanks, Gorgeous George. But let's talk about WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, or as I used to know it as, WWF, World Wrestling Federation. It became WWE in 2002 because WWF is also like Worldwide Wildlife Foundation or something. So anyways, now they're WWE, but I kind of go back and forth in between these two. But it's the same company. So WWE had been around for a long time. Like they were a regional promotion, like regular wrestling promoter, but they had their big boom in the 80s, which is when like the professional wrestling we know today kind of had its big boom.
Sure.
And that was because Vincent McMahon and his wife Linda bought the company from Vincent's dad. And at that time, wrestling was still a very regional thing, but Vincent was like, no, I want to take this nationwide. And this was a big deal because there was already this like well-established boundaries of different wrestling promotions that were separated by territories, but Vincent didn't care. He started to like poach wrestlers from all over. In a Sports Illustrated article, Vincent said, quote, In the old days, there were wrestling fiefdoms all over the country, each with its own little lord in charge. Each little lord respected the rights of his neighboring little lord. No takeovers or raids were allowed. There were maybe 30 of these tiny kingdoms in the U.S., and if I hadn't bought out my dad, there would still be 30 of them, fragmented and struggling. I, of course, had no allegiance to those little lords. So,
how imperial of him.
Yeah, he's kind of a jerk, and that plays into, like, the whole storylines in the WWE, which
it does
talk about it. But
he's a big... As soon as you said his name, I was like, oh, I know who that is. I can picture him in my mind.
Well, he had this one big break where he started becoming a storyline. We'll get into that. But he started like getting groups from American Wrestling Association, AWA, which still exists today, I believe. So his first like big major person was Hulk Hogan, who was like so young at the time. But Hulk Hogan was popular because he was also in Rocky 3. So he had like fans outside of just people who watched wrestling. Some other people that McMahon signed were Andre the Giant and Roddy Piper. And then in 1994, he forged a relationship with another young company called MTV. And this gave birth to WrestleMania, which is the Super Bowl of wrestling. Or is the Super Bowl the WrestleMania of football?
Yeah, there you go.
Depends on how you look at it. So while having like a large competition like this was nothing new to wrestling, Vincent's goal was to make WrestleMania something that non-wrestling fans would enjoy. In the first WrestleMania, he invited Mr. T, Muhammad Ali, and Cyndi Lauper to participate. So like Cyndi Lauper acted as the ringside manager for a female wrestler. I need to like go back and watch this.
This is bonks to me.
Yes. So that was called The Rock and Wrestling Connection, and it basically was amazing for MTV's ratings. Like, it really benefited them, and then just kind of, they did it every year since then. Between 1992 and 1997, WWF faltered. They were hit with steroid abuse allegations and allegations of sexual harassment. A lot of the WWF wrestlers, including Hulk Hogan, moved to World Championship Wrestling, aka WCW. So I feel like there's a lot of rivalry between all the different, wrestling groups.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people who like actually care about wrestling know.
Yes,
You know,
all
the drama between the two. But so they basically lost a lot of their big names. Then they started hiring like young new wrestlers, and they called it the new generation. And this had Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Razor Ramon, Bret Hart, and The Undertaker.
The Undertaker.
Yes. I know some of these names, it's like, okay, I know that.
Yeah.
In 1993, WWF premiered Monday Night Raw, and then 2 years later, WCW premiered Monday Nitro, which aired at the exact same time slot. So it was like the Monday Night Wars between the two for years. How's a girl to decide which one to watch?
How do you know?
Okay, but then we were talking about when Vince McMahon got involved.
Yes.
So Bret Hart, he was like one of the most famous wrestlers on WWE roster. As like one of the new young guys. He stayed with them for years. He was like the reigning champ of,
I need to look a picture of him up. Keep going.
So he was like, the poster boy. But it all changed in 1997 at something called something happened called the Montreal Screwjob, which some consider to be the most popular wrestling moment of all time. So basically what happened was, the story has it that Vince McMahon and his employees covertly manipulated the outcome of the match between Bret Hart, the reigning WWF champion, and Shawn Michaels. So it's called the Montreal Screwjob. A screwjob is a wrestling term that means an unfair and controversial finish, often involving cheating or outside interference. A lot of the times it's a worked screwjob, which means it's part of the story and it's kind of used to generate heat or sympathy while allowing a popular wrestler to lose.
Sure.
But a shoot screwjob occurs when the finish is changed without informing the losing wrestler. And that's what happened here. So basically, this was Bret Hart's last time to compete in the WWF before signing over to the WCW. And Vincent was upset that he was doing this, like leaving WWF and going to their competition, and he didn't want Bret Hart to leave a champion. But Bret Hart was not willing to lose to Michaels because he had an on and off-screen feud with him for years.
Oh my God, I love this. Give me more.
They all agreed that the match would end with a disqualification, which would let Hart retain the title, but then Hart was supposed to lose or forfeit the title at a later date. So it was supposed to be a screw job, basically. But behind the scenes, Vincent had something cooking to make sure Michaels won. No one knows like who else was involved in this, but Vincent had the referee end the match as Michaels held Hart in a sharpshooter submission hold, which happens to be Hart's signature finishing move. So like to add insult to injury, he was basically, he lost by his own move. Someone else doing his own move on him.
Could you imagine watching that live?
I know. Well, Michaels was declared the winner by submission and crowned as the new WWF champion. And this moment was like huge in wrestling. It was like parodied a lot of places. This was the beginning of what the WWF calls the, quote, Attitude Era, which featured many storylines of Mr. McMahon, the evil, arrogant boss, pulling strings. So all of a sudden he was like, that kind of became part of it. Like the boss, the manager, like the wrestlers being upset at them.
Mm-hmm.
However, many wrestling fans and several within the business believe the entire incident was all fixed and everyone was in on it, including Hart. So that's for you to decide. Although Hart was ostracized from the WWF, he didn't come back to WWF until a 2010 episode of WWE Raw, where he had a lengthy on-screen discussion with Michaels, the man who beat him unfairly, about the Montreal Screwjob and other events in their past, and they agreed to call it a truce, bringing closure to the incident after more than 12 years, which I'm sure was huge for the wrestling community.
Oh my God, I know.
So, all's well that ends well.
Okay.
There's so much more about wrestling. I don't have the time to get back into it,
Sure.
but I do want to end on a fun little like wrestling term that I read about.
Okay.
So, in professional wrestling, kayfabe is a term that means the portrayal of staged events within the industry as real or true, specifically the portrayal of competition, rivalries, and relationships between participants as being genuine and not staged. So it's also a code word of sorts for maintaining this so-called reality within the direct or indirect presence of the general public. So it's kind of this like suspension of disbelief, and you just like believe that everything's real. It's called kayfabe.
Okay.
But it's kind of like a nonsense term. People are like, where did this term come from? And one theory is that the term goes back to the older carnival wrestling days when, these traveling wrestlers, they would use like pig Latin to make slang words. So it might be pig Latin of fake, which is aikfay. Kayfabe may have evolved from that.
That's really interesting.
Yes. Do you have kayfabe? Do you believe in the kayfabe? It's a noun, supposedly. I'm not sure if I'm using it correctly in a sentence, but...
I think as a kid, I had no idea it was fake.
I feel like
I was
that's
so
why
young.
Yeah. I like didn't like how violent it was, but I feel like I'd heard, I was like, is this real or not? Like I didn't know. Now it's like, I know for sure it's all fake. But...
Right. It was, in some ways, I was afraid of it because they would like use chairs and it seemed like they were hurt and like they would go into the audience sometimes. I was like, I couldn't possibly go to one of those matches because I would get picked on and it would be horrible. Oh, wow. God, I remember so much of this now that you're like bringing it up. I'm like looking at Shawn Michaels now. That's so funny. Oh, wow. And I need to look up The Undertaker really quick. The Undertaker.
I feel like I would definitely go to professional wrestling.
I forgot that this is what The Undertaker looked like. Okay, Triple X. I need to look at Triple X. Triple X wrestler?
My favorite was Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I also liked The Rock because he lived in Miami.
The Rock, of course, The Rock.
Yeah. Can you smell what The Rock is cooking?
Yeah. Well, The Rock has done well for himself.
I know.
He really, really has.
And John Cena. I feel like a lot of professional wrestlers have.
What are some of the women? I remember some of the women were like, Chyna was a big one.
Chyna is the one I know. Sasha Banks.
Yeah.
Is the one from The Clue.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would be a whole other topic, like women in professional wrestling.
Yeah.
So if it comes across in a crossword again, maybe I'll do it as a part two to this one. There's just so much to cover. And like all of my sources were on like wrestling websites and they were using all these terms. I'm like, I have no idea what the hell you guys are talking about.
What the goddamn hell are you even talking about?
Exactly.
All right. So if we should go see. They definitely come to one of the theaters on the south side.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Anyway.
I'm in, but not to be like stereotypical, but I'm worried that crowd doesn't take doesn't follow COVID protocols, so
We'll have to do some research before we commit. Or, you know, some years down the line from now, we may. Cool. Okay. Wow, that is a throwback to my childhood. Thank you for that. All right, so now that it's my turn, we are going to be going to the Friday, April 15th New Yorker by Elizabeth Gorski, 46 across, cortege vehicles. And the answer is hearses. Ooh, spooky, spooky. And I think I'm pronouncing that right. Cortege, cortege. It's French. Who knows?
You're asking the wrong B.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm talking about hearses today.
Oh
Hearses are also known as funeral cars or funeral coaches. So when I say the word hearse, like what is the image that comes to mind?
Like a PT Cruiser looking car with like the curtains in the back. Windows.
I feel like a hearse is like, to me, it feels like quintessentially American, and it feels like very like connected to funeral rituals in America, but hearses are used worldwide, which I thought was interesting. We will mostly be focusing on the evolution of hearses throughout, like, you know, Western culture today, but just to say, you can see them in many cultures, like in Japan, for instance, they use hearses. Anyway, where do hearses come from? The word hearse, spelled with an A, so Hearse, comes from the French word hearse, sans A, so no A, which in turn comes from the Latin word herpex, which means harrow, Harrow, and a harrow is an implement for breaking up and smoothing out the surface of soil. So it's different from a plow. A plow like goes really deep, well, comparatively deep, and a harrow only like touches the top. And we'll get to why a hearse is related to a harrow in just a little bit. But first I want to say that this is not the first time that we've covered death topics on the podcast. Grace talked about jazz funerals, which is a practice found in New Orleans. She talked about that in episode 34, Four Inventions of a Funeral, for instance. And while I can't get into the history of all funeral practices in all cultures and religions worldwide.
You can't?
Not today. It is important to say that the act of memorializing, like, the dead is like a hallmark in most cultural, in like most cultural practices within any given society or religion. So it's hugely important. There is evidence as far back as 60,000 BCE that humans and Neanderthals decorated their deceased with flowers, antlers, and other items from the natural world. And while it's impossible to know exactly why they did this, we can assume that it had something to do with some sort of spirituality or some form of memorializing the dead. So it's something that's been around for a very long time, these funeral practices, right? We even talked about some of the most impressive funeral and or burial landmarks in the world. Episode 55, Crystal Balls and Marble Halls. We talked about the Taj Mahal, which is a mausoleum. In episode 92, Kings, Queens, and Everything in Between, we talked about King Tut and the pyramids. Again, mausoleums. So just to say, each culture, people, religion has their own unique ceremony around memorializing the dead. I'll talk about just a couple right now. In Tibet, among the Buddhists, there's a thing called a sky burial, where bodies are left outside, often cut in pieces for birds or other animals to devour. This serves a purpose of eliminating the empty vessel of the body while also like allowing the soul to depart. And it like kind of like mimics the circle of life. Then there is a burial tradition in Madagascar, followed by the Malagasy people. They open their tombs every few years and rewrap the people inside with fresh burial cloth. And once that's finished, they go outside the tomb and they do a dance. And this practice is called, translated roughly to turning of the bones. And it's meant to speed up the decomposition process and push the spirit closer to the afterlife. In Korea, there's like a tradition called ashes to death beads. So after, you have the whole funeral procession, the person is then cremated, and the cremation, the ashes are made into little beads of like, they're small, glossy, different colors. And you can, instead of like having an urn in your house, you would put the beads there and it takes up less space. It's more environmentally friendly, etc.
I feel like I've seen that.
Yeah. And those
before.
are just a couple interesting, funeral practices from around the world. In the United States, memorial services vary, but they follow like a similar structure. Religion depending, of course. Families prepare the remains, they gather to mourn, someone offers a blessing or words of remembrance, and then everybody individually has their own way of memorializing the person who has passed away. So, back to hearses. Well, we didn't always have hearses. Before hearses came beers, spelled B-I-E-R-S, not to be confused with the German word Bier, which means beer, which you drink like lager. According to Merriam-Webster, a bier is a stand on which a corpse or coffin is placed, and the archaic definition of a bier is a quote framework for carrying. Bier comes from German, Old English, and Old French, and essentially means quote to bear, as in a weight or a load, to like bear a weight. And so before we had hearses, people used biers to carry bodies from their place of death to their final resting site. A bier could either be hand carried or like on makeshift wheels of some sort. The simplest were pallets with handles, and more extravagant ones had large wheels which could be pushed by hand. So, Grace, if you open, I have some photos that I'm going to be sharing with you. The image document, the very first image you'll see there is a bier. That is an example of what someone might be laid upon, a coffin or a pallet with a body might be laid upon to like take you to your final resting place. It seems natural then that a hearse to transport a body would evolve from a bier, but it's a little bit more interesting than that. So we know that people would transport bodies on a bier, either handheld or wheeled. Before bodies were transported, however, they were often laid out for mourners to visit or to view as part of some funeral rite. So usually like the casket or the body laid out. And most of this is coming from like Western Christian tradition. If you have something similar to this in your culture or religion, please let me know. Or if you have something different, let me know. Anyway, so the body is laying on the bier. There would be a wooden or metal framework which stood over the bier or coffin. So imagine that bier you see there. That's like sitting there. They would have a metal or like wooden framework up and around it. Okay. And it was used to support the pall being the cloth that covers the curtain. So you could like drape the pall over this framework. The framework might also have numerous spikes or arms coming off of it, and it would hold candles. And it was a very decorative thing. It was essentially like sitting at the front of the church. You would have the bier, and over top of the bier, you would have this big framework, and they've got candles all over the place. Mourners would come in. Exactly. Those spikes that held the candles resembled the teeth of a harrow. So that was the farm tool that we talked about before. Okay. And so because it resembled a harrow, people started calling it that contraption, that canopy, a hearse. So hearse as a term was originally just used to describe the decorative framework that went around the coffin and on top of the bier, not the transportation itself. As time went on, the word hearse applied not only to the construction above the coffin, but to the receptacle in which the coffin was placed. And therefore, from around 1650 onward, it came to denote the vehicle on which the dead were carried to the grave. Prior to that point, it was just a bier. Like biers, hearses were originally pulled by hand, but then people started decorating and adding adornments to the vehicle, which meant they needed horses to pull the whole contraption, so on and so forth. Some interesting facts for you. Even though we started using the word hearse in like, the 17th century, and that's around the 17th century is when people started using horses to pull these contraptions. There is evidence that English royalty were using horses to draw carts holding dead bodies or coffins to their, final resting place as early as 1468. If you look in that photo, the next photo, there's a beautiful painting of the funeral procession of Richard II, in which you can see there are horses essentially pulling a covered bier. So you have a bier, the coffin is inside, and over top of it is this hearse-looking contraption where if it was sitting in a church, there might be candles on it.
Mm-hmm.
And during the same century, Henry VIII had 3 horse-drawn biers said to be 14 feet tall and pulled by 8 horses each. Even more fascinating, the transports were made of wax.
Did it melt?
I don't know. The reason why there's no depictions of this is because they're so temporary. Apparently, it was made with between 1.1 and 1.8 tons of wax. And it was common practice to make your funeral thing, this contraption that you would then pull in a bier to the church, out of wax, which is why there's no like real depictions of it. But the next photo here that I'm showing you is the funeral procession of a bishop, John Islip, and it was painted in 1532. And that is an example of like what a wax hearse on a bier might look like.
It's huge.
Massive.
Really tall.
Really tall. And like a lot of that is candles, right? Anyway.
Seems dangerous if they're lit.
If it's lit, it's all candle and like people are carrying this or you got horses. I'm like, how's nobody getting startled right now? Okay. So from the 17th century onward is when the word hearse is being used to describe the vehicle that transports the deceased to their final resting place. During the 1800s and onward, it was really when hearses came into their own. No longer were horses just flatbeds with wheels to pull a coffin to the graveyard. A lot of this is due in part to the Victorian style of mourning. If you're familiar with Victorian mourning, you must know that Victorians were very dramatic. Victorians believed in ghosts. Victorians believed, and this is all happening around the Civil War, so they were just experiencing so much death. In America specifically, they were experiencing so much death. They had to interact with death in such a way that like they had to almost be okay with it. Like, I forgot to look into this, but like Ouija stuff, or like not necessarily Ouija boards, but like talking to seers, like all that happened.
Talk
all that
about that
stuff
in my topic.
Right, all that
people
stuff.
were like obsessed with death because people were dying all the time.
Exactly, and so because of that, they were like, well, if we're gonna die all the time, we might as well make the hearses look really fucking cool. Okay. So Victorians were dramatic. They were into ghosts. They were into death in some way or another. So the designs of the hearses became more elaborate and intricate. There were carvings of flowers, doves, scrolls, heavy velvet drapery. Usually all hearses were crafted from mahogany. It's a gorgeous heavy wood. Some of the top hearse builders at the time were Crane, Breed, and Company, which was in Cincinnati. They started making highly ornate hearses in 1850. And then there was James Cunningham, Son & Co., which is a company based in Rochester. They manufactured highly ornate horse-drawn carriages for shipment worldwide. And if you couldn't afford one of these like really fancy hearses, you would basically just go back to that bier, essentially, and like have your horse pull it. And then in 1895, the largest horse ever made was made by a Czech master craftsman named Václav Brozik. It was over 13 feet high and 21.5 feet long. It weighs almost 3 tons and it takes 8 horses to pull it. So that next photo is an example of a Victorian hearse. That is the largest hearse ever made. And you can see on the sides that it's got big kind of like almost domed glass windows on each side.
Wow.
Imagine dying and then having
That's one way to go.
8 horses pull you to the yard and that. It's pretty impressive. There's like gold work and like, you have to watch on YouTube if you want to see some of these photos. That's pretty cool. And then if you keep scrolling, you'll see, I mentioned a couple of the famous hearse constructors of the time. You will scroll down and see some of the Crane and Breed manufacturing company from Cincinnati. That's like a flyer for, you could buy their round end metallic casket, and then you could also buy their King David style hearse to put it in.
People are buying their own hearse.
You could, yeah. Or sometimes like the church would buy the hearse.
Oh, yeah. That makes more sense.
And this hearse is gorgeous. It's like, it's very rectangular and it has drapery, but it's like a huge glass box.
Mm-hmm.
It's very nice. Let's see. Okay. Funnily enough, the first ever motorized hearse in the United States was actually an electric hearse.
Wow.
It was built by the General Vehicle Company of New York on May 1st, 1908.
Well, we're almost coming up to its anniversary.
Right? It didn't last. It wasn't really that popular because by 1909, the first hearse with an internal combustion engine appeared. And essentially was like, you're done. And it appeared at the funeral of a Chicago cab driver named Wilfred A. Prune. There was an undertaker for Prune's funeral. His name was H.D. Ludlow, and he commissioned a vehicle to be built out of the body of a horse-drawn hearse and the back of a bus, essentially. So look at like a hearse, like the front of a hearse, and then the back of a bus, and like push them together. Okay, and that was the first internal combustion engine hearse.
It's like a Frankenhearse.
Like a Frankenhearse. This new type of hearse was so popular with the wealthy customers that apparently Ludlow used it for 13 funerals before he had to buy a bigger version. He was like, oh my God, these wealthy people love it so much. The innovation was so popular with the public, but most funeral directors found that motorized hearses were too expensive, about $6,000 per hearse, compared to a horse-drawn hearse, which would cost you about $1,500.
Mm-hmm.
But by the late 1920s, thanks to lower prices, like in gas, for instance, gas-powered hearses were the norm. So by 1920, we had dropped the horses and we had picked up the gas, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I feel like a horse-drawn hearse is much more my style.
I know, it's more... The Victorians knew what they were doing. It's very dramatic.
Yeah.
And very gothic feeling, you know? Another interesting fact that I found, it wasn't uncommon in the early and middle parts of the 20th century for hearses to serve as both funeral coaches and ambulance, depending on what the community needed at any given moment.
Well, you don't always have a funeral going on. Why let a nice car with a big trunk go to waste?
Well, exactly. Or they pick you up in the ambulance, they can't resuscitate you, and they flip you over and take you to your funeral. But regulations for ambulances became stricter in the 70s, and now it is rare, very rare, for them to be used for both.
They're like, yeah, you can't just put a sick person in the trunk of your car.
This next photo on the list is a Art Deco hearse. I really wanted to show this one because the Art Deco movement is, you see it in like architecture and how it changed things in like the 30s, but you also see it in how it changed like the decoration of hearses, because up until this point it was Victorian style, like very ornate. Art Deco is in itself also ornate, but it has like a Grecian like style to it as well. In this photo in particular, you can see that they have wood paneling around the entire hearse, and the wood paneling is designed to look like drapery.
Mm-hmm. And it does. And
there's no windows. That's a big difference, because in Victorian time, they had windows so you could see the casket and see the body.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 30s, they have it all closed up so you can't. Different strokes for different folks. Okay, but then 1938, a company pops up called Sayers and Scoville, and they introduce the Landau style of hearse. The term landau is from the Victorian era, and it references carriage bars that could fold and unfold, which would essentially open parts of the carriage to the elements.
Mm-hmm.
They adapted this idea to motor vehicles, creating a semi-convertible car where the rear quarter of the car could be opened by folding the cover at the Landau joints. So if you scroll to the next photo, it is a Landau hearse. The Landau joints are that S style metalwork.
Mm-hmm.
And in the center, in older Landau style hearses, that actually could open up like a big door.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
And nowadays, that is probably like the most That's like the most famous look of a hearse. That's like when you think of a hearse, that's probably what you see. And they don't really open up like that anymore. It's just like decorative. But they used to open up on that joint, which I think is kind of interesting. And so, yeah, that brings me to the 20th century. Like, the Scoville company came up with the Landau-style hearse in the 30s, and we have essentially been using that same style ever since.
They're like, well, this seems to be working.
This is working. And, like, every culture and every, like, country even has just, like, a different look to their hearse. The hearses in England look very similar in shape to ours, but they just have much more windows. It's, like, almost all windows in the back, whereas... in the American hearse, it's like more of that like leather covering in the back, and you might have a window facing the rear, but you might not have any windows on the right and left side of the car.
And it's always super tinted.
It's always super tinted.
We don't like to see death. We're scared of death.
Exactly. The Victorians knew what was going on, but then after that, we were like, no, thank you. We're done. A lot of people died, I guess, in the Civil War. Anyway, so I want to point out some fun, of course, need to point out some fun hearses from history and or pop culture, of course. Let's see. I'll start with the funny one. I don't remember this one at all, but I do remember watching Ghostbusters as a kid. The apparently iconic ECTO-1 from Ghostbusters. Grace, if you scroll down, you will see the white hearse.
Yes.
This is actually supposed to be reminiscent of the hearses that not only were used as hearses, but also used as ambulances. It also resembles like an ambulance from the early 1900s. And it's just funny because they use this car apparently to catch ghosts. So it's like straddling that line of life and death, the ambulance and hearse. And I think that's very funny.
Yeah, that's cool.
The next is the Haunted Mansion hearse in Disney. This one actually has a funny story to it. So it sits outside of Disney's Haunted Mansion. There's a myth that suggests that this hearse is the same hearse, used at the 1877 funeral of Brigham Young, the prominent Mormon and former president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Why? I mean, I believe it, but...
So apparently the myth has been debunked, but
that's what they want you to think.
Disney's having a hard time getting people to stop spreading the myth. I think the way it's been debunked is proving that Brigham Young did not actually use a hearse at his funeral. And to that I say, prove it. Anyway. And then if you scroll to the final photo in the movie Harold and Maude, which is a very like pro-death movie, and death positive movie. Harold builds a hearse from a Jaguar XKE, which he then crashes it at the end of the film. And the photo, it's actually a really beautiful hearse. So you can see the really nice Jaguar front and the very hearse-esque back of the car. Anyway, so that's a hearse. Those are hearses. Well,
there's a picture on here that you didn't talk about. The Tesla hearse.
Oh, the Tesla hearse. Okay, yes. So there was a part of my research that I wanted to go down. I didn't have enough time to go down this path, but I read an article that was talking about like what's the future of hearses. And it's interesting that hearses started as electric vehicles because now people are trying to kind of go into electric hearses as well. The hearse photo you see here is a Tesla converted into a hearse, which is done by a British man in like 2018. Funnily enough, however, one of like the big hearse manufacturers has been manufacturing electric hearses since 2012, but only recently like are the sales going up because of, you know, the eco movement or like, you know, the electric car movement. So yeah, that is the Tesla hearse. So, wow.
I just imagine charging your Tesla hearse at like the charging stations.
I know. Actually, rolling up in an electric hearse is kind of nice. I think I would still prefer a horse-drawn carriage.
I don't want to be in a hearse at all.
Well, I mean, honestly, neither do I.
Like,
but
shoot me
one
into
of these
space
days,
or whatever.
Yeah, one of these days we're gonna have to deal with something or other.
I don't like to think about my body rattling around in some box.
Funny you should say that, because they actually have what they call our beer pins, and they're like foot-long pins that they will, like, if you were to get shoved into a carriage, for instance, in a coffin, they had these big pins that they would shove through the bottom to like hold you in place. Not you, like the bottom of the coffin.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait.
Sorry. Not to get morbid. No.
Yeah.
Shove through the bottom of the coffin to like hold it in place. I
That's
imagine
good,
you would
yeah.
still be rattling, but not too bad. Not as bad as without the pins. So
I prefer no rattling. That's me, though.
no, we
each
should
their
invent this no rattle hearse. Customer satisfaction guaranteed.
Well, you know how they make like cup or like bowls for children that are kind of like, it's like a bowl balanced within a bowl that is able to, you can like move it around without it
Yeah.
ever tipping over.
Yeah.
We need like a version of that for a hearse, like a hammock type thing in the back that kind of swings but doesn't bounce.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
Like a gimbal head for like, steady cams.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But for a casket.
If anybody from Shark Tank is listening, we are taking investments right now.
You should really prey on people's fears of rattling around in the back of a car.
Right. Ay. Some of these hearses are gorgeous. So that's all I have to say.
Well, our friend Hannah used to drive a PT Cruiser, and she said that her friends used to call it the hearse, even though it was white. But I
Yeah.
feel like that is kind of a vibe for a
It
car
is.
to have.
It is. The hearse outside of the Haunted Mansion in Disney is white. So
Yeah, it is. So anything's possible.
anything's possible. So
It worked for Brigham Young.
it really did. It really did. It worked for the Ghostbusters too.
Yeah, their hearse was also white. So,
Mm-hmm.
well,
Well,
I guess that's it.
that's it and that's all. We talked about wrestling and death today. Gotta love it.
I feel like I could do something with the Undertaker.
Oh my, I cannot wait to see what title you come up with next. By the time people are listening to this, you will have already come up with the title. This is crazy. To think
Crazy
about.
how that works.
Crazy.
Well, if you want to let us know your fears about death or your thoughts on wrestling, you can find us on Twitter at The Good Eve Girls
Or Instagram at the Good Evening Girls.
or TikTok at The Good Eve Girls.
Come on down. We love to hear about your wrestling hot takes and your death cold takes.
That's pretty good. Might use
Thank
that in the
you.
description.
Someone take this mic away from me before I before I burn the house down. You know, I'm on a roll here. So
And humble too.
yeah,
All right. Well, everyone, keep curious out there.
please.
Keep on keeping on, and
We'll see you next
will
week.
See you next week. We will be back next week. Don't you worry. I know we kind of pulled the rug out from under you last week.
Yeah, I know. Don't stress. We'll be back, and we love you. Bye.
Bye.